G'day, and welcome to another solo solo session of the Combat Corner. My name is Jackson. There is no Coby. Thank God there's no Coby. You guys will probably be thankful there's no Coby. It's just me. And today I'm here to break down the up-and-coming UFC pay-per-view. I've got a couple bits of news to get into before that. Just a couple. So I've got a drink as well. I've got a young pink monster, which I'll be sipping on, but I won't be rating as there's no one really to bounce back on in terms of gauging where this lands, maybe among two people. God forbid we have to say his name again, but Coby is normally, giving these drinks a little bit of a lower ranking. I myself have probably acquired a bit more of a liking to the things that we have. My palate's a bit more matured, you could say. But yeah, I think that's enough waffling, and let's get into it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Combat Corner.
And we're cracking things off. So, we've cracked open the zero sugar strawberry monster, and we'll crack into the news first of all. So it came out the other day that Robert Whittaker actually had some emergency surgery before going into his fight against Ikram over the weekend, which is even more impressive considering the way in which he got things done via a first round KO. Obviously, you'll know that if you saw our breakdown of the card, or if you even better off maybe saw the card. So yeah, had a bit of an abscess or something like that on the side of his face. Getting rushed into surgery only, I think, maybe 2 weeks before the fight, maybe even a week. So getting on the plane out to Saudi, his face was still numb, and they were all kind of pretty hopeful that he would come around. And it sounds like since the fight, he's going to have to go in and get some more surgery done, which could put him at risk of not being on the Perth card like we hoped. There was some chatter about him being the backup for Drekas versus Izzy, which I think is scheduled for August in Perth. But if he has to keep going through these surgeries, it's unlikely that we'll see that. They did talk about him announcing some other news as well in the near future, possibly surrounding another fight that might be in the works. And as Coby and I talked about just the other day, that could be our man Sean Strickland, which would be a very exciting matchup. Some pretty different styles there with Robert kind of normally blitzing with his striking, kind of moving in and out in that kind of way, whereas Sean tends to just walk people down and kind of expose their weaknesses that way. So that would be kind of a bit of a clash of the titans, kind of two very different styles coming to a head. So that's Robert Whittaker. And then we have Arman Sarukian. So with his walkout to UFC 300, he had a bit of a bustle up with a fan, kind of punching some guy in the head as he was doing his walkout, which is never really a good look. And it has taken now, I guess, a couple of months to review that, and they have decided he is due for a 9-month suspension, which is pretty lengthy, especially considering he was looking like he was verging on a title shot against Islam. So that is a bit of a spanner in the works. They said that they could reduce it to a 6-month suspension if he were to release a anti-bullying video, which I thought was quite interesting. But yeah, that's Arman Sarukian. So 9 months would definitely put him out of obviously a title shot in that time, and I'm almost certain that Islam would want to fight within these next 9 months. Who that's going to be, we'll have to wait and see. But it won't be Armin. So yeah, we'll keep our eyes peeled to see whether or not he comes out with some sort of anti-bullying campaign. I think that would be quite interesting. But if that's not the case, he is looking at a lengthy 9-month suspension. Anyway, UFC 303 is just around the corner, this weekend to be precise. Alex Pereira versus Yuri Prohaska is the main event, stepping in for what was supposed to be Conor McGregor's return. And also, I guess you could say, the return of Michael Chandler after his now almost 2-year hiatus from the sport, waiting for his fight against McGregor. We've also got Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopez coming up, which is another exciting matchup, which we didn't know we were going to have. Jamal Hill pulling out of this card, obviously, along with Khalil Roundtree. And then we had Carlos Olberg in there, who has also pulled out. So the cursed fight at light heavyweight has landed on Anthony Smith and Roman Dolidze coming up from middleweight. Then we have a women's bantamweight fight between Bruno Silva and Macy Chiasson. I'm probably butchering that, but then opening the card, which is a big surprise to me. I'm surprised this isn't maybe in there on the third fight down. We've got Machado Gary versus Michael Venom Page, making his second UFC appearance. So we'll start at the top with what I think is going to happen. Maybe give you some of my predictions where you should be putting your money, where you should be remortgaging your house. We'll get into it. So first off, Alex Pereira taking this fight on pretty short notice. It did look like he has been training quite a substantial amount in the last few months. We've seen a whole flurry of clips of him in the gym, which is a good sign. Yuri Prohaska, we don't often see a lot of what's going on behind the scenes for him anyway, so that's, I guess, not so much of a surprise. But what do I think is going to happen in this fight? I mean, it is really tricky because we haven't yet seen Alex Pereira, apart from his fight against Jan Blachowicz, come up against someone who is proficient in wrestling. And that did look like we were going to have that with Magomed Ankalaev, who for some reason still hasn't been given his title shot against Pereira, even though the two of them were going back and forth about a potential matchup straight after UFC 300. So that fight for me is what should be here. My guess is that Ankalaev maybe wasn't happy with the time frame they were willing to give him to prepare for this fight. And I can understand that. I mean, you don't want to go in there and fight for the belt, for potentially what could be your one and only shot at the belt, and do it on a few weeks' notice. Like, you want to have plenty of time to prepare for that. Get your head into the right space, get your body into the right space, because it is a real mental game when you're in there by yourself, and especially when you're fighting a guy like Alex Pereira, who is so heavy-handed, moves so well throughout the octagon, and has just put every single person in front of him pretty much out up until this point. I mean, we've seen fights go the distance with the likes of Jan, but I mean, the rest of them have been pretty short and sweet for the most part. Obviously with a couple of outliers there, but to knock out the likes of Izzy at middleweight when he was cutting a substantial amount of weight, and then more recently he had the knockout against Yuri, which last time I guess you could say was potentially a bit of an early stoppage, and then most recently against Jamal Hill, finishing him in the first round, which again had some controversy surrounding it, but I think to anyone who really knew what they were looking at, that was a clear enough KO. And like, for Jamal to be still whining about it is pretty sad. I think he just needs to get over it, move on, kind of reset, focus on keeping himself healthy, and get back in the octagon and have another fight so that he can set up getting back in there and possibly fighting for the championship. But back to the task at hand, Pereira versus Prohaska. What do I think is going to happen? I think we're probably going to see Yuri be a little bit more tentative here. I'm hoping for his sake. I mean, it's a tricky fight for me to pick sides because I really want either of them to win. Like, both of them are such fan favorites. They both bring such exciting things to the octagon that it doesn't make sense to kind of side with one or the other. But, I mean, Alex has just given us no reason to doubt him up until this point, especially against someone like Yuri, who normally does just go in there and unload his weapons and kind of just shoot for the hills, doesn't really give a shit about where his chin is. And when you're someone like that, Alex does have a knack at finding the chin. So I think this is going to be yet another Alex Pereira knockout. I don't think we're going to see more than 3 rounds. And if we do know that he does wear quite well into the later rounds, Pereira, whereas Prohaska in his fight against Glover, when they went almost the distance, he did kind of just start wearing out a fair bit towards the end. So I'm going to say Alex Pereira by 3rd round knockout. I think this one's potentially going to be a fair bit cleaner than the original, I think it was UFC 295, where he headlined against Yuri the first time. So that's my official prediction. And then I think we really need to see Magomed Ankalaev fight for the championship. I mean, you can't really deny this guy at this point. He has made his way up there so many times. He's been robbed of some opportunities where things really didn't go his way. I mean, he did have that fight against Jan, which, you know, could have really gone either way, which is why it ended in a draw. But to be then immediately robbed of the shot to kind of get back to it with his little stint with Johnny Walker and now this. So I think we need to see Ankalaev in there next. Moving on, we've got Brian Ortega, a bit of an old dog in this fight, being 4 years older than Diego Lopez, who looks fresh in the octagon from what we've seen of him so far. It's funny to call Brian the old dog in this fight, though, because he's technically speaking less experienced than Diego Lopez. Diego Lopez having a record of 24-6 compared to Brian Ortega's 16-3, but obviously his tenure within the UFC and kind of the fights that he's had over the years have kind of, I guess, been spaced out a little bit more. And I think that's probably going to play into the favor of Diego Lopez, being a little bit more active of late and really kind of pushing the bill with moving his way into the rankings. Apologies for keeping looking down. I mean, I've got no outside computer assistance like we normally do. I'm running off my cellular device. So I'm just going to bring up his Sherdog, with his most recent fight being against Sadiq Yusuf at UFC 300, getting a first round TKO. So this being only his, this will be his 5th fight in the UFC, and we're seeing him right up there against a top dog like Brian Ortega. It is a big jump in competition. And like I said, that his activity lately is probably going to play into his favor. I think Ortega's experience in these high-level fights against, you know, real top competitors is probably going to play into his. So we're going to see a bit of a clash of heads here. Like there's experience versus activity. There's like the young hungry guy versus someone who looks like they're trying to chip their way back to a shot at the belt. And I really think that Lopez can get it done. I mean, he's shown so many different angles, so many different tools since we've seen him in the UFC, and we've seen him develop every single time to be a much better and much kind of cooler-headed fighter. I think his gas tank is really gonna be questioned by Ortega. He's really probably going to try and drag it out a little while. Um, but yeah, I think Diego Lopez potentially is going to outstrike him. He's shown some real problems in that area for someone like Brian Ortega. Um, so yeah, I think we're going to see. I don't think it's going to be a first round KO like he has shown us before, but I think Ortega's going to kind of survive the first round. Probably going to, I would imagine, maybe hang back and try and get some reads. Potentially, I don't know if he's going to try and test his ground game. I mean, Lopez has shown that he has pretty good ground game. And Ortega is well known for his jiu-jitsu, but is he going to push it against a guy like Lopez who is fairly untested at this level and you don't really know what he's capable of against a top-level guy like Ortega? But that's yet to be seen. But I think Lopez is going to get it done, potentially by decision, but I think there will be a stoppage, maybe some point in the second. And if not, yeah, I think he's got the tools to grind out a decision need be. Moving on. Anthony Smith coming up against, I should know this, shouldn't I? But I've forgotten. It's hard to sit here and talk to yourself, but I do it most of the time anyway. Ah, that's right, Delitse. A weird fight. Literally no one asked for. But nonetheless, it's here. We've got Anthony Smith, who seems to just show up when the UFC needs just anyone to step in at any point in time. He's just always ready to go, which, I mean, hats off to him for that. Does he bring excitement to the octagon? Not really. Does Roman Dolidze bring excitement to the octagon? Again, no. But is this going to be an exciting fight? I think the two of them being a little bit slower and a little bit kind of more methodical in their approach to the fight game is probably going to mean that they will have to lay off a little bit of that and try and push their incentive on the other guy, like really kind of push the pace in which way they want to take the fight, whether that be Smith or whether that be Delitse. Who knows? But I mean, Delitse coming up from middleweight, we don't really know what he's going to perform like at light heavyweight. He obviously hasn't had much of a training camp to prepare for this. Anthony Smith being a guy that trains with Jamal Hill, so he has been in camp for this date anyway because he was training with Jamal. I think Anthony is coming into this with a big upper hand, really. Like, he's obviously got the experience. He's definitely got the experience at this weight class, and he was already somewhat preparing. He would have known, I imagine, about Jamal Hill's injury before the UFC did. Obviously before Roman Dolidze did. So for this fight to be taking place, I think you can only really go one way, and that's with Anthony Smith. Don't get me wrong, I don't like saying that, but I think Anthony Smith probably grinds out a decision. I hope it's exciting. I predict it's going to be exciting. But then at the same time, I get the feeling I'm going to be sitting here breaking this down next week, falling asleep, talking about the two of these guys. But hopefully one of them goes out there with a bit of a spark, maybe a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and gets the job done one way or another. The earlier the better, in my opinion. I mean, both of these guys need a statement win. Maybe Delitse might look better at light heavyweight. Maybe he might come in there with a bit more spark, not having to cut that weight down to middleweight. Who knows? But Anthony Smith being the older guy, having the more experience here, it's got to be sitting in his favor. So that's the first three fights out of the way. Just another young sip of this monster. I'm not sure I'm that sold on it yet. What does it even say? Ultra Strawberry Dreams. I don't know if you guys at home have ever had Strawberry Dreams, let alone Monster Strawberry Dreams. I think I will probably struggle to dream after drinking a full 500 mils of energy drink at this time in the afternoon, but that's fine too. What the fuck is a strawberry dream? Sounds like something you'd find on the Urban Dictionary, maybe. Monster strawberry dreams. Ultra. Ultra strawberry dream. Maybe a strawberry blonde dream. Like my friend Zachary. He's a bit of a dreamy guy. Bit of a dreamy little fellow. Yeah, a dreamy, creamy monster, ultra leamy. Moving on. Woman at bantamweight. The least stacked division in the whole of the UFC organization. The one that needs something. It needs another Kayla Harrison fight. It needs Juliana Pena to return. It probably needs the likes of a Ronda Rousey or an Amanda Nunes to come back and maybe revamp their career, because this is the ultimate nap of a division. This is the fight you can miss. I mean, what is really weighing on this? You've got Bruno Silva, who got pushed into a title shot, a vacant title shot against Raquel Pennington, and just had an absolute bore of a fight. I would say probably one of the worst championship level fights ever. Ever. Down to the skill level, the action, like the fact that both of them obviously didn't have the cardio to be in there for 5 rounds, and now we get to see her again. I think this is her first fight back since then. I could be completely wrong. I'm not. So coming up someone with pretty much exactly the same record as her, 10-3 for Macy Chiasson, and 10-3 with 1 no contest for Bruno Silva. I don't really care. I'm not going to lie. I think I've made that pretty obvious anyway, but let's have a look at Macy Chiasson's record. Let's see who she's fought. Let's maybe get a gauge on what kind of person we've got here, and in the way of, is this someone that we could see go up to the belt after this? I don't know. I mean, she's coming off 1 win, before that a loss to Irene Aldana. First round submission in her last fight. That's not too bad, but I suppose she's bouncing back pretty quickly. She's wanting to stay active. That's good. But in all honesty, does this really matter for the bantamweight division? I'm going to say no. I mean, we've got Kayla Harrison, who's making her way into the top level of the rankings there, who's probably more than likely going to fight for the title next, unless Pena comes back. So what happens here, I guess, might set up maybe some sort of title eliminator for Kayla Harrison, or possibly for Pena, but I'm gonna just skip past this, because the next fight for me, look, let's just say, boom, it's gonna be a decision. I mean, it normally is a decision in these in this level of fights. So we'll say that we're gonna go for a decision for Macy Chiasson, I'm going to say, because I don't like Bruno Silva. I think she's popped, and if she hasn't, then she's definitely missed weight. There's something hanging over her head, within my head, that makes me think this, so I'm going to go with that, and I'm going to move on. Because the first fight on the pay-per-view, on the main card, is Ian Machado Gary, the cornerman, the ultimate man in the chair, versus Michael Venom Page. Michael Venom Page, this will be his second fight in the UFC, his second fight against a ranked guy, and I'm going to be honest with you, I'm hoping it's going to be his second win, and I think this one's going to be a lot more impressive. I think Kevin Holland defensively is a better fighter than Ian Gary. Offensively, whole different story. But defensively, Kevin Holland, for one, he is a chin of steel, and we saw that in his fight against Wonderboy. And two, he does a fairly good job of hiding his chin, whereas Ian Gary doesn't. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see that exposed against Jeff Neal because the two of them just pity-patted around the octagon for 3 rounds and put us all to sleep with one of the worst fights on his resume. Ian Gary, that is. But Michael Venom Page brings a whole new level of striking to the octagon. He's almost like an Adesanya of sorts. Like, he has this whole new style. He's really, he's had one fight and he's kind of put a bit of fear into these people in the division. And I like the fact that they booked this because Ian was talking mad shit about Michael Venom Page before his fight against Kevin Holland, saying there's no way he gets it done against Kevin Holland. And then went in there and showed why his style works in MMA and why he can beat people like Kevin Holland who have been so well versed in MMA, who have fought the best of the best, and yet it was still too much for him. So I think we're going to see Ian Gary exposed. I think we're going to see him go from 14-0 to 14-1. And I think it's going to get done in some sort of impressive fashion. I think we're going to see some very unorthodox kicks from Venom Page, which we normally do, but I think that could be his way to victory. I think, like Coby has talked about before, Ian does leave his chin open to a left hook a lot of the time. And I wouldn't be surprised if Venom Page was able to kind of mix up his striking in a way where he exposes that with the heel of his foot. And I would really like to see that. So please make that happen. What round? Let's say second round. Second round, wheel kick knockout for Michael Venom Page. We have some prelims, as we do in most events. So I'll quickly just jot over those now. The last fight on the preliminary card is Joe Pyfer versus Marc-Andre Barriault, which is a bit of a mouthful. Joe Pyfer probably deserves to be on the main card, in my opinion. I mean, there's at least 2 fights on the main card, and you don't even really need to guess what those are. Well, I don't even really need to say what those are for you, but I mean, could we not just headline the prelims with Anthony Smith, please? Or with Bruno Silva and Chiasson? Can we get Joe Pyfer on the main card? I think the reason for this is he probably let down people's expectations with his last fight. But I mean, good on him. He stepped up and took a bit of a challenge. We're seeing him now with a 12-3 record at the ripe old age of 27. So he's got a long career left in the tank, Joe Pyfer, and he's still learning a lot, I imagine, at this point in his career. With that decision loss to Jack Hermansson over 5 rounds, big step up. This guy has the highest recorded punch the UFC's ever seen since they most likely changed the machine after Francis Ngannou left and then found some way of perking the numbers up, because I have a real problem with believing that. But I think we're going to see Joe Pyfer get it done by knockout. I'm not going to spend too much time on these. I mean, we've got that. We've got Cub Swanson versus Andre Philly. 2 guys who are probably quite well matched, in my opinion. I think that'll probably be a good fight to watch, so keep your eyes peeled on that. Then further down, we've got Charles Jourdain versus Jean Silva. No clue. This is what Coby's normally here for. He normally has a bit better of a memory for these kinds of things. But opening up the prelims, we've got Peyton Talbot versus Giannis Jamori. So a guy with a 12-2 record versus Peyton Talbot with 8-0. Peyton Talbot is probably, in my opinion, one of the most exciting prospects in the bantamweight division right now. So untested, so underrated by a lot of people, and at 25 years old, he has so much time left to grow. And we've seen so much growth from him already in the short span he's been in the UFC. And I think there's a real shot that this guy goes a long way. Having quite a unique look as well, with his weird circular tattoos and the long hair and all of that. But I mean, yeah, that's right. We saw him beat the shit out of Cameron Simon not too long ago. We saw him beat Nick Aguirre, Reyes Cortez Jr., Christian. Oh no, that was in Uriah Faber. So yeah, he's had 2 fights in the UFC and 1 with the Dana White Contender Series. And in those 3 fights, he's looked great in every single one. He's shown a submission win, a decision win, and a TKO. And I think we're probably going to see him lean on the jiu-jitsu in this fight, potentially. I mean, if we'll see how the striking goes and then go from there, but I think we're probably going to be seeing a submission win here from him. And that's what I'd like to see. Is there anything in the early prelims worth noting? Not really. We've got Andrei Arlovsky, which I think is one of the oldest active fighters in the UFC at the moment, if not the oldest, at 45 years old, fighting a guy called Martin Boudet. So this being a heavyweight clash. I'd like to see Arlovsky get a win. I think his last fight out was against that painful, it was against Waldo Cortez Acosta, where this young guy kind of just danced around him for 3 rounds and tried to make him look like a dick. But it's like, you're fighting a veteran. So yeah, that was frustrating. So I'd like to see Arlovsky get a win here, but apart from that, guys, there's not really that much going on in the early prelims, that is. I'll bring up, see if there's much news going on here. Oh yeah, that was another thing. Pavlovich speaking about how his head wasn't in the right space during that fight, was looking for the knockout too much and just got outpointed by Volkov, which I guess we all saw that happen anyway. What's next for him is going to be interesting. Whether or not he can find the spark again will be interesting. And who they put him up against next as well will also be interesting. But enough about that. There's fuck all in the news. Fuck all in the news. One thing I haven't done for a while is a weather report, and I think it's probably likely because we're in this dark, gloomy garage with no windows, with no way of looking out the window. And when you're not looking out the window, you're not really thinking about the weather. But I will say, it's some pretty average weather here lately. But closing this out, I want to say thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, I don't know what's wrong with you, but well done. That is a hats off to you. If I was wearing one. But yeah, like the video, comment if you have any advice, if you have anything that we missed. Comment and let us know what your predictions are for UFC 303. And we release a video every Tuesday, Thursday, sometimes Friday, when the other mans can be bothered showing up to do a tier list. But yeah, we'll see you next Tuesday. Bye.